Well, thank you. That was utterly overwhelming, and I think I will just go and lie down now because I don't know if I can live up to that. So, I guess when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you think of is not, oh, today I'm going to write a case study, right? Anyone ever put that on top of their to-do list for the day? Okay. Well, I don't do it every day, but I do have phases where it's really important to me to write a case study, and I will confess I feel a phase coming on pretty soon, so partly as a result of this. So I've been a big fan of case studies for many, many years. Over a decade ago, Mark Bovey and I tried to get a case study competition going in EJOM, and I was delighted when Kevin invited me to come and speak about case studies. So I'm very passionate about case studies. I write a lot of them, and I'd like to encourage you to write about them as well. Write them. So my aim, I do believe that every person in this room can present a case study or write a case study. Would you agree? Do you think you can? Yeah, and you all want to, don't you? Come on, you're all going to go away from here because this is my aim, and you can enjoy it. I write a lot of all the writing that I do. Case studies are the things that I really, really love writing, so I will write them quite spontaneously. Other science papers, I have to be forced to do them. Case studies, I will wake up some mornings and say, I need to write a case study about this because this is so exciting. It's this here. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you, when I started writing, when I started putting this together, I was really amazed at the resources that the BACC have to help people write and deliver case studies. And so I want to introduce you to those. I want to talk about 3 different types of case study because variety is good and people might prefer to produce one type over another. And as I said, my aim at the end of this presentation is that everyone here will be inspired to write a case study, okay? And I'll show you where to access the resources to help you do that. Okay, does that sound like a good way to spend the next hour? Good, okay. So why would we do this at all, okay? Why don't we just turn over and go to sleep in the morning when we have that funny voice that says write a case study? Well, from the PR perspective, case studies are really important. They're a very good way of communicating with the public, okay? So they increase public awareness of acupuncture and the work that we do, the exciting work that we do. And they inspire people to try acupuncture, okay? And I think you've seen things in the media about that. From the acupuncturist perspective, they're a good way for us to communicate with each other, and I don't need to go into how case studies are kind of the way, the tradition of traditional Chinese medicine. This is the way that we communicated, the classic acupuncturists communicated their work with each other. So we can, I think, revive this and build it into our own contemporary practice. But it builds community. We often work alone, we're often isolated, we often are maybe not sure about what we're doing. Often I talk to acupuncturists and they're doing brilliant things, and I will say to them, write that up, make it available for everybody. And it doesn't very often happen, but you know, there are good things happening there that are just being hidden. So from our perspective, we can learn from each other, we can share our successes, but we can also share the challenges, okay? Acupuncture isn't always easy, we're not always successful, and we can be brave. We need to start talking about that and share those challenges. And also, from our perspective, it's great CPD, yeah? From a research perspective, okay, these are very low down on the research hierarchy, but they are starting to emerge as a kind of important part of research. They're kind of being reevaluated and being seen as an important contributor to research. What they represent is real-world clinical situations, yeah? So that's what's happening in clinic. It's not what happens in some designed randomized control trial. It's what's happening in the real world. So it tells us a lot about how this happens. And they can be a foundation for further research, okay? So those are some reasons why we might do them. or it might be for the purely selfish reason of seeing your name in print, okay? And you can see I have written many case studies and published them. I've written a lot more than that aren't yet published, okay? They're sitting on my desk waiting to go into my book that never gets written. But also what you can see is I've partnered up with people to write some of these, okay? And I'd like to thank the European Journal of Oriental Medicine because they are very welcoming of case studies. And EJOM really, I think they were the first people I wrote for as an acupuncturist. So they're very good as a stepping off point, and I'd like to thank them. From my own experience, reading, being exposed to other people's case studies has been very important. And I'd like to talk about two case studies that really, really had an impact on me. The first one was Nini Davies' publication in EJOM in 2013 of using a daily home support moxibustion protocol in stomach 36 during chemotherapy. So Nini came and spoke to me. I think it was at the BXC conference in 2012, and she said that she had been working with this cancer patient who was going through chemotherapy. Nini and I were both very interested in Friedrich Stabler's work, where he does moxa on the back shoe points for people going through chemotherapy. But this woman was living on her own, and she didn't have anyone who could administer that. So Nini taught her to self-moxa stomach 36, and so she wrote up this study. Now, it was very interesting for me as a practitioner because I knew about using moxa on stomach 36 just as a way to build qi and blood, but I had never been very successful in getting my patients to do it. And so I'd kind of given it up, and I just thought that's one of those things that just doesn't work for me. So her case study encouraged me to try again, and nowadays, I get mostly all my patients self-moxing stomach 36, okay? And it works fairly well. As a researcher, this influenced me. And so I thought this was very interesting. And the next year, I can't believe it was just the next year, I applied for the BXC grant, that research grant that Kevin referred to, got it, and initiated a study to look at how you could teach people in the NHS to self-moxa stomach 36, okay? So Nini's case study had a personal, a clinician, an effect on me as a clinician and as a researcher, okay? And one of the outcomes of that piece of research is we've got some important safety data about people using moxa, okay? So we've got 1,975 recorded cases of people self-administering moxibustion to stomach 36 and no burns, okay? So I think that's important. I need to get that paper written up so we can get it out there, okay? Another case study that really caught my attention was Selina McNair's. Is Selina here? No? Okay. Selina McNair, who specializes in IVF, acupuncture and IVF, and she presented her case study at one of the BXC case study days, the first case study day. Now, this was a really interesting case study to me. Again, one of the things I struggle with is doing IVF with my patients, and I find my patients are an unruly bunch, and patient management is a problem. So I struggle, and it was very interesting because Selina works in a clinic, which is, I would say, it's kind of it's a very specialized clinic, and there are practitioners available all the time, so they can really, really give a very first-class service to their patients. And yet, she still had the same problems with patient concordance that I have. So that was encouraging to me. It wasn't just me being inadequate. It was, this is just how patients are, okay? The other thing was that this patient ended up going for some kind of conventional treatment. And what Selina was left with at the end was, I think, what often we as practitioners are left with. How much of our intervention much has our intervention provided for these patients, and how much of the success is due to conventional medicine, okay? And I did ask her, I did try and encourage her to write that up for EJOM. She hasn't done it yet, but it was about that uncertainty. And I think that's really important, that we also talk about our uncertainties. So that's how it was for me. So how can you get involved? Because you're all desperate. You're not even going to come to the conference tomorrow. You're going to sit home and write case studies, aren't you, okay? So let's start. Let's do case studies for PR, okay? So obviously the purpose is to promote acupuncture to the public. We want to connect with the public and educate them and inspire them. But we can also inspire each other through these kind of case studies. And these are basically stories of successes, okay? We don't want to be talking about our uncertainties to the public, okay? This is about success. And I don't know if you've noticed that if you go to the BXC website and click on the newsroom, there is a case study section where these appear, okay? So you can provide one to Katie Osborne, and it will appear on the BXC website. So instant publication, okay? And they also, Katie, do you know Katie Osborne? Do you know who she is? She's our PR person. Okay, she's not here. We have to Kevin's not here. Okay, she's got to be introduced at the conference, okay? So she's in charge of PR, so she's our contact with the media. And so some of you might have noticed occasionally in some of the BXC newsletters, there'll be a call for case studies, yeah? Okay, so those are for the media. There were two calls this year, one for osteoporosis and one for studies of people in acupuncture and care homes. So all you need for this, your recipe book here, is you need a patient who would be willing to take part in publicity. And that may include being interviewed, sending the BXC a photograph, and possibly appearing in the press, okay? And the important thing here, confidentiality and consent are two really important things with case studies, okay? So here, the patient is identified, okay? Usually, we respect confidentiality, but the patient is identified. It's not confidential. It requires the patient's consent to use their story and their photos, and the best thing about it is that this is really easy peasy for you as a practitioner, because the way the template is designed, the patient fills in the template, okay? They might want some support from you, but so get your patient to do the work, you get a case study. Great. Katie has a template, okay, it's 2 sides of A4, and in that you give asks for a very brief history of the problems and the treatments before acupuncture, a brief outline of the acupuncture treatment received, the outcome of the treatment, what this means to you, meaning the patient, and then who the acupuncturist was, signed consent story for the story and the photo, and Katie will send you one of those, okay? Did I want to say something there? Yeah, okay, and this is brief. This is from the patient's perspective, so it's not a discussion about what points and treatment protocols you used. It's how the patient perceives the treatment. So, Katie welcomes ad hoc case studies, and if you, like I say, if you go to the newsroom, you can see examples of case studies already there. So you can just do one and send it in. There are, as I said, specific calls for case studies in the BXC newsletters, and those are Katie's contact details. So you can contact her to get the template, which you, of course, are going to do immediately, aren't you? Good. So another kind of case study is what I call the informal case study, and that is kind of what we use within the profession to generate discussion, to provide insight, to kind of break new ground, to suggest theory development, and it's about, as I said, sharing amongst practitioners. It can be stories of success, but also stories of challenges and what I call not successes, okay? We never have a failure, but we often have not successes, if that can exist. So these are mainly for oral presentation rather than written, okay? So you might, if you are in discussion groups, your regional groups, I know some of the regional groups do case study presentations, some supervision groups do, okay? Really important resource that the BACC has are the BACC case study days, and I'm going to talk about those. With these, even though they're informal, we keep the patient's details confidential, so we don't reveal their name, and we don't reveal who our famous celebrity patient is by giving any clues to what film they were last in or something like that, yeah? Okay. And you don't necessarily need to you don't formally need to obtain the patient's consent, but getting the patient to consent to using their information is a courtesy, okay? And particularly if you are using photos, okay? And that's particularly for the case study days. So, the BACC case study days. Anyone been to one of these? Gavin. Sarah, thank you. And are they good? Because you what? Right. So did you present a case study there? Okay, right, okay. Okay, right. Okay, okay. So, and Gavin, do you want to comment? Yeah.
Because it is quite sort of, not a, it's kind of a niche interest in a way to me in terms of the perception of them. But when you hold the event and a lot of people come along, that's quite inspiring. So it's quite hard for people to come to the central locations and they're doing it. So obviously, depends.
So was that the first one in?
The first one, and I think there's slightly less people at the second one, but it's still very popular.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So, you know, don't you? Yeah, you're going to go, okay? You're all going to, you're going to have a big to-do list at the end of this presentation, okay? So, okay, so they're free, okay? This is the big thing. They are free. They will cost you nothing, but so to attend in terms of registration. And they provide some wonderful opportunity for skills development. So they're great CPD. They will give you the opportunity to develop a case study. If you are not a seasoned presenter, then they give you the opportunity to stand up and present, which is great experience. And, you know, it would be great to see some of the people who present their case studies writing those up and getting them published, like I suggested that Selena did with hers. They're a great opportunity to learn from other practitioners. So I was at the first one, and it was great. Great insights into what other practitioners' interests are, their styles of practice, how patients respond, how patients are concordant with treatment or not. And so really tremendously interesting. And they are great networking days, so you can get out and meet some fellow practitioners. So Mark Bovey, who is the BACC research manager, has come up with some suggested guidelines for case study presentations. And these are his headings, and they're much more detailed. There's much more detail underneath, but you can get those from him and find out what that is. But basically, he wants to know something about you, the practitioner. The case study, what prompted you to write this? What's special about this case study that makes you want to present it or write it? You want the information about the patient, the treatment plan and general principles, the treatment details as they turned out in practice, and then your evaluation at the end. So you can get those guidelines from Mark, okay? And Kevin also has provided, certainly in a presentation, some guidelines for presentation. So if you are not familiar with presenting, it's talking about having slides not too full, your PowerPoint slides, not too much waffle, okay? Ending on time is very important. And what are my other notes here? Yes, he says, stay on time. The organizer will love you. I have a timer here, right, that I've got going. I've actually remembered to do it. Dress appropriately for your audience, not too casual, because these are videoed and they're put up on the BXC website as well. Be polite to and about your host, e.g. the BXC, and stand up energetically. So some good tips for all public speakers. The next case study day, and you can book now. I see that I looked at the site the day before yesterday, I think it was. It's free for 70 delegates. There were 3 people booked on, so you can't say that there isn't space for you, okay? That's the 3rd of December. It's a Tuesday. They tend to run from 10 to 5. They're at the Confucius Institute in London. And you just click on free training days on the BXC website, and there's a little description, marked short description. Now, the other thing that is needed to make these days work is people need to present some case studies, okay? So, well, we're going to have an action plan at the end of this, so somebody's going to write a case study for this, okay? So they need case studies to make the day work, so this is an invitation to you to write a case study and do this. So, I've said all this before. You book on the case study day on the BXC website. There are videos of the presentations of previous days. So if you click on the research tab, there is a heading for case studies, and you can see, go through the variety of case studies that have been presented. And for further information, you contact Mark Bovey. So last and certainly not least, because these are the most work, are what I call formal case studies. And so they are very similar their purpose is very similar to informal case studies, but they're much more detailed, okay? And these are for sharing amongst acupuncturists, but also other groups, okay? So the last case studies I wrote with an oncology consultant. I don't deceive myself. I don't think he read a bit about what I wrote when he wrote his bits, but anyway, I just thought you can see how I practice. But also those I have distributed to oncology nurses and various groups. So it can be inter and intra-professional. As I said, they're the most labor-intensive because they're quite detailed and specific. They may be stories of successes, but they can also be nuanced discussions about complex cases, because we do deal with a lot of complex cases, and I think we need to talk about those. They have the potential to be academic and scientific. They will often contain references to the medical literature, and they can be the basis for further research. So if you fancy a go at one of those, they are mainly written, and they're mainly written for publication in journals. And I've already referenced the European Journal of Oriental Medicine, which again, and I love writing for EJOM. They're very good to write for. So I would encourage you to do that. The Journal of Chinese Medicine also does, and there are many other journals. And as I think they're called case reports in the medical world, are kind of becoming more popular. There are more journals that publish case reports as well, so specifically aimed to publish case reports. And if you're lucky, you might get one in the BMJ. Who knows? They do some too. So if you're going to write one, always check your journal and your journal's requirements first, okay? So make sure that the journal you choose does accept case reports. They will have author guidelines, okay? And those guidelines will tell you important things about what the word count is that they want, what formats. If it's an acupuncture journal, they will tell you what format they want the points in. If you're using references, they will tell you what format they want the references in. So it's quite specific writing. Most journals will require that your patient has given informed consent. Sometimes that can be oral, but I quite like to get it in written form. And you need to state in your paper that informed consent was obtained, and ideally say whether that was written or oral. Patient details remain confidential. And this is important because often, now I tend to involve my patients when I'm writing a case study about them. I tell them that I'd like to write a case study about them. I ask them if they'd like to be involved. And involvement can mean anything from, well, tell me what you'd like to be called in the case study. I try and get them to read it when I've written it. Sometimes I get them, the last ones I did, I got my patients to write part of the case study with me. But often patients will say, oh, you can use my name, you know, I don't mind, I want to go out in public and say as who I am. And my job, I have to explain to them, my job as an acupuncturist is to protect their confidentiality. So even if they're keen to be Beverley de Valois in this case study, I don't get to use that name, okay? And that's important. So Mark also kindly has done some suggested guidelines for writing case reports, and those headings are the same as the suggested guidelines for presenting case studies, but they're a bit more detailed. Although they're more detailed, he says, give a concise summary, not all of the details from your practice notes. You should focus on the essentials that make this a unique and interesting case for the reader. So I guess this just leads me to the idea of writing a story. A case study is a story, and often if you are daunted by the idea of starting to write one, just think of it as telling a story. Yeah, okay? So for these, you will draw on the relevant literature to set your case study in a wider context, and I see I didn't put down there that Mark will give you the guidelines. So, some additional notes from my experience. I've already said this, including the patient's perspective is good, and certainly there are something called the CARE Case Report Guidelines that have been published, and so these are kind of official guidelines. All research has some kind of, all types of research have some kind of guidelines. You might have heard of the stricter guidelines for acupuncture reporting, okay? So the CARE guidelines are guidelines similar to stricter, but for case reports, yeah? And they, one of the things that they encourage is including the patient's perspective. It's good to get that input. Like I say, patients often appreciate being involved, and I find that it's often a learning opportunity for them. So I have written up case studies and given them to my patient to read, and they've come back and said, I didn't know you thought that about me. In a pleased kind of way, I think. And they kind of get a different, a more profound insight into their treatment, I think. So it can be useful clinically for us as well. It can include perspective of other members of the care team. Like I said, the last case studies, I involved the oncologist. That was an experience that I may repeat again, but not for a while. Okay, so EJOM welcomes well-written cases. You contact Sarah O'Neill. She's not here this afternoon, but she'll be around. I'm sure there'll be an EJOM stand. Go and talk to her about the case study that you're going to write for her, okay? Again, Mark is your additional contact and support. So, how are we doing? Are we all inspired? Okay, so if you're feeling a bit trepidatious, be brave, okay? It might feel daunting, and even when I sit down and I start to write one, I kind of think, you've seen how many I've written, I still can feel a bit exposed. Sometimes when I'm going through the case notes, I think, my word, why did I do that? And how am I going to explain that in this case report? But you find a way. Yeah, remember when you're presenting a case study, you're telling a story, okay? You're engaging others in the story of acupuncture, and that's important. You're influencing others, you have that possibility. And you're contributing to building a picture of our contemporary practice, and I think that's also really important. And it's really rewarding. It's really satisfying. You know, it's kind of I find it satisfying to do. I do like seeing my name in print. I do like getting feedback, but it's kind of nice to write a piece and get it, have some sense of achievement, I think. I'm a researcher. I have very little sense of achievements. A case study is good. Okay, so just to summarize, we've looked at 3 types of case study: PR for the public, informal for sharing within the profession, and formal for publication or research. So are those all clear to you and what's involved? And I said my aim was at the end of this presentation, everybody will be inspired to present or write a case study. So I don't know if we're quite there yet. We've got some time left, so, and you know where to access the BACC resources to do that, don't you? Yeah, we're all set, aren't we? Okay, so now we're going to do some work. Okay, so we're going to have a little workshop. So what you're going to do is you're going to work in pairs, okay, so pair up with somebody. And for 5 minutes each, you are going to discuss an interesting case from your practice, okay? Something that is really exciting in your practice, or even a problematic thing. And you're going to discuss it, because often telling the story to someone else is a good way to start, okay? Because when someone else says, that's really interesting, why don't you write it up and present it at the case study day? That's a good way to get started, okay? So you are going to discuss an interesting case from your practice, and you're going to discuss how you might present this. Are you going to do it as a PR case and send it to Katie, get your patient to do it and then send it to Katie? Are you going to do an informal one, so within your regional group, or at the BACC case study days, which everybody's going to go to on the 3rd of December, right? Or are you going to write one for EJOM, okay? So you're going to do that. And then you're going to switch and repeat, so the other person's going to have 5 minutes. And then you're going to write down your action plan, okay? So everybody's going to go away from here with an action plan. So you're going to plan what you're going to do, and you're going to plan when you're going to do it by, okay? Right? So.
You're not fancy at all, are you?
Pardon? Discuss. Okay, so get started. I've got the timer going. Okay, thank you. How fantastic. What a lovely buzz of excitement there was in the room. You know, it's a presenter's nightmare that you're going to do something like this and everyone's just going to sit there and not engage. So this was really exciting. So we've got a few minutes. I didn't see a lot of writing. I saw a lot of exciting talking. Who has a plan and who would like to share it? Yeah, please.
Well, we were talking about, I've got 3 patients pregnant at the moment. I really struggle with them coming postnatally. And I really want to try and encourage patients to come postnatally because they just stop coming. And that's the part of what we were talking about, and the plan to try and get more information out to the patients about.
Okay.
Persuading them to do that. But I'm writing blogs first trimester, second trimester, third trimester about them, so I'm quite involved. I'm just about to write my second trimester.
Okay. So okay, and in terms of a case study, would you present?
That's something I could do when they've all had their babies, and I've persuaded them to come back.
Okay, so there's potential there. Okay, good. Any more ideas? Yeah.
We were just talking about football. That was okay, wasn't it? No, in seriousness, it was a good activity. And I've done case studies myself. I just wrote a book, and in the book I've got a lot of case studies. So I enjoy it immensely, and I think you get a lot out of it. And as you said earlier, it's not always the successes. Sometimes it's the ones where you don't get the results you want, and maybe it's almost considered a negative, but how you adapt to that and how they then improve as a result of that experience. So, yeah. So, thank you. It was a good experience to bounce ideas.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed your football chat. Good. The book was about football? Anyone else? Come on. Okay, well, I have a man who's going to give a testimony about the case study day. So Gavin, who's not an acupuncturist, had some very interesting things to say about the case study. Can you remember them?
Oh, well, I hope so. I was just killing time in the intermission.
Kill time in my
Yes, I'll say please come along to the thing in December. I'm not an acupuncturist, so when I hear acupuncturists talk about their practice in a way that I understand it, I find that quite interesting, and they talk very positively about the treatments that they do and the variety of treatments. So they might be humdrum, or they might be sort of quite avant-garde sort of conditions that they talk about. So there's a lot of stuff there, and I just thought of this as kind of the stuff that you see on Facebook all the time. How do I do this? How do I do that? So there's like a confidence building thing around certain treatments. So I was hoping that out of this exercise, there's like 30 odd case studies that you'll bring along on in December, because that's the hard part for the event, is just having enough case studies for people to talk about. So do a case study, come along.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, yeah. So if you are going to go and present a case study at the case study day, you contact Mark Bovey, and I think he will have deadline dates and things like that. Okay. So, and you've got his details. Good. Any questions or any comments? Well, thank you. You've been fun, and I look forward to seeing your case studies out there all over the place. Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.